Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Today we're going to be talking about how we can protect and recover the pelvic floor in pregnancy and postpartum and the mysteries over understanding female sexual health. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is someone who's lectured at both the university and government levels for medical professionals around the globe for more than 30 years. Since 1998, she has helped educate clients and their healthcare providers to understand how diet, nutrition, and lifestyle can be used to balance blood chemistry. She also has a PhD in molecular and cellular biology with minors in biochemistry and electrical engineering. Today we're going to be talking about something called Pelvic Ball of Steel. It's Pelvic Health Transformation Program. I'd like to welcome to the
Hello.
Beyond 50 radio program today, our guest, Dr. Sandy Bevacqua. Sandy, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Now, it was really interesting when the producer put this across my desk because I thought, what is pelvic bowl of steel? That was just something I've never heard before.
Well, I can tell you that a pelvic bowl of steel is what we call a pelvic floor and all of the muscles and bones that connect it. When that pelvic bowl and body is now integrated, and it's back to great health, great strength, like we were when we were young.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell us the importance of what we're talking about here so that our listeners have some better scope on what it is we're talking about.
Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what the pelvic floor is. The pelvic floor is a complicated structure that includes muscles, fascia, ligaments, bones, and nervous tissue. And it controls the function of some of the organs that it holds up and contains. So the pelvic floor is kind of like a triple-layered sling of muscles. And it's a cushion. It's supporting the pelvic organs, and those are the bladder, the rectum and intestines, and in a woman, the vagina and her uterus as well. And so it's really a very important set of structures, let's say. And if it fails, if there are issues, and there are many that can happen, such as prolapsing of an organ, and that means if the pelvic floor weakens, an organ can kind of fall down. And in a woman, it can actually fall into her vagina, that vaginal space. And it can actually, if it gets really bad, fall out of the vagina. And so bladders can prolapse. We call that a cystocele. Her uterus can prolapse. The uterus can fall right through that space. The vagina itself can kind of collapse on itself, and we can have a rectum or intestinal material that can kind of double over and fall through the vaginal space as well. And that's a really devastating condition because it can cause, if the rectum or intestines are doubled on itself, then you're going to have constipation. You can't get any material through there, and it can be very, very painful. And it can cause a lot of inflammation, which could turn into horrible diarrhea and rectal or bowel incontinence. So we can have incontinence issues, prolapse issues, and there's also people that quite commonly have issues with the bladder. They have urinary urgency. They have to to go into the bathroom very, very often, and that is another sign that things are just not quite right with those tissues. And we also have pelvic pain syndromes and sexual dysfunction that can happen as a result. So that pelvic floor is really important for all the function of all of those organs.
Now, what tends to happen, or how do people, what causes this to, I guess, create the problems that it does? I mean, you've explained it, but is it from sitting improperly, just not taking care of yourself? What is it exactly?
There are so many causes of pelvic floor disorders you would not believe it. Something as simple as a case of constipation or diarrhea or an irritated bladder could end up, or like a bladder infection, can end up causing something like pain running down the legs, or a strained groin muscle can lead to bloating and bowel retention. There's all kinds of this can cause that, can cause that. So in some cases, like a bruised tailbone, which is very common in athletes, might end up causing sexual dysfunction, bladder or bowel dysfunction, or even an organ prolapse. And, birthing larger babies or having a difficult birthing process, repetitively straining for bowel movements or having problems with constipation, chronic coughing, so you're asthmatic, is going to tend to have more issues. Anybody who's doing heavy lifting, especially for a mama who's lifting heavy right after she has a baby, she's very likely to develop a prolapse. And being overweight or obese. So there's so many sets of events that can happen, and so many conditions that can cause pelvic organ prolapse or pelvic pain syndrome, any of these dysfunctions.
Now, how do they end up with these kind of pelvic floor issues? I know we're talking about it here, but is this through just inactivity, sitting incorrectly? What goes on here?
Well, structural problems can be an issue as well. I mean, in fact, in our course, we teach that there's several practitioners that come in and address different types of structural issues. But oftentimes, the individuals that have these issues describe an event. Now, there are some early warning signs. And what I did was I put together a list of those early warning signs, and I have them available on the Pelvic Bowl of Steel website. So if people go on to pelvicbowlofsteel.com, they can get a list of a free list of all of the early warning signs. Because a lot of people are about to have pelvic organ issues, and they have a pelvic floor dysfunction about to happen, and they don't know it. And, in fact, 25% of our young adults already have pelvic floor dysfunction, and they don't even know it. So, and we know that, more than half of the adult population have dysfunction to some degree, and we know that depending on the population you're looking at, about 70-75% of our elderly, 65 and over, have some diagnosable pelvic floor dysfunction. They have incontinence, they have prolapsing, they have pain, they have sexual dysfunction. There's all kinds of issues that can happen, or urinary urgency.
Now, it's interesting when you take a look at something like this and you say that it seems to affect a lot of people at a varied level of ages, is that how often is this sort of misdiagnosed as something else?
Well, a prolapse is kind of hard to misdiagnose, but oftentimes it's mistreated.
Okay.
In fact, I can tell you that there's many different ways to go about taking care of things, and the medical approach is to give medications. All right, there might be maybe, let's say we're managing a woman with chronic pelvic concerns, or she's got a prolapse or incontinence. She might be prescribed a series of drug treatments for the disorders, and like endometriosis is very common. And she might be given hormones, pain medication like nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. She might be giving antidepressants, anticonvulsive medications are often used, and they're given for a trial period. And the problem with this medication approach is that you're going to have a lot of side effects, such as irritability, mood swings, heart palpitations. This is what I'm hearing. Lethargy, weight gain, dry mouth, constipation, and many other symptoms. And so it seems like a really big price to pay for the initial issue. Now, most people know if they're incontinent, they know they're incontinent. They're not misdiagnosed. They already know it, and it's become such a problem that they finally have gotten over their embarrassment to go to a medical professional and seek help. Maybe the doctor wants to do surgical treatment. And, for instance, prolapses are often treated surgically. And some women could benefit from surgical removal of, let's say, their endometriosis causing pelvic pain. or a hysterectomy might alleviate their chronic pain, especially if they have a uterine disorder like adenomyosis or fibroids, this sort of thing. But oftentimes the pain will persist after the surgery, after hysterectomy, and particularly in the younger woman. But I've had people come into my program that have had repeated surgeries. One woman had 6 surgeries in 3 years for her cystocele, so her bladder prolapsed, and she was given the mesh and the sling and all the different types of surgeries. There's a long list of them. And the reason that there's such a long list of these surgeries is because they fail very often. Well, she started with a very mild cystocele. By the time she had done her 6 surgeries in 3 years, she had gotten worse. She had failed worse after every surgery. And she ended up with a very severe cystocele and a rectocele and had urinary and fecal incontinence. So she was a mess when she came into our program.
Ow.
And she's doing fine now.
Mm-hmm.
So, unfortunately, rarely is a more of a at-home natural approach or a physical therapy type approach ever suggested as a first approach. And I'm here to say to you that it's a better approach. It works better, and it's the effects are much longer lasting.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious now, is there a lifestyle that people tend to have that cause this more often than others?
Well, having babies, choosing to have babies, that would do it. We know that 50% of women that have had children develop some pelvic organ prolapse, and at least 11% of women in this country will choose to have surgery, and they'll have surgery at least between 1 to 4 times for their prolapse because they fail so often. So that's a lifestyle choice. Mm-hmm. Being obese, having heavy weight, being in, not having a strong body. So one thing that we can do, and we do practice in our course, is holding the body correctly, attending to that structural piece that I mentioned before. So that will be something that is attended to. So if someone is slouching or has poor posture or has a weakness on one side of their body or the other, that can definitely lead to it. Not being sexually active will cause a woman's hormones in her pelvis to change. She'll have less hormone activity, and she may develop atrophy of her tissues and not be as strong in her pelvic floor as a result. So choosing not to be sexually active can be, detrimental.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds that there must be a connection between a person's sexual health and the health of their pelvic bowl, right?
A huge connection.
Oh boy!
And I can tell you that I could touch on this in so many different ways, but as a result of having the Pelvic Health Transformation Program, we've had so many women that have come back into being able to be sexually active that I had to make a course that, there was a lot of questions. Women were not aware of their sexual, where their erectile tissues were and how to use them. And women actually have at least as much erectile tissue as a male does, and sometimes more. But it is placed in an array throughout her pelvic floor and throughout the pelvis in many different areas. And most women don't know where all those areas are. Most women have never experienced the 7 different types of orgasms that they can have. And so I started a different class to help the women that had all these questions, and that's called The Mystery is Over, Understanding Female Sexual Health. And I believe we're going to be talking about that on the 12th. We have another class coming up. So we'll be speaking about that course in detail. And but I can tell you, some of the feedback I've been getting has been quite amazing. In fact, one lady wrote to me. She said, "Dr. Sandy, I want you to know that because of this class, my husband and I have begun to continue our physical intimacy that we haven't had for 22 years. What a great joy for both of us. To say the least, he is ecstatic and so am I. And so that's just one person, but I can tell you that a lot of women are choosing not to be sexually active because they have issues going on. They may have an organ actually coming into the vaginal space. They're not going to want to have anything in there. Besides for that, it's uncomfortable. And some women have pain. There's all kinds of pain syndromes that women can get into, like vaginismus, which is that it can be caused from the change of hormones in menopause, and it can cause a lot of discomfort or pain during intercourse. There's vulvodynia, there's vestibulitis of the vulva, and there's all kinds of conditions that can cause pain. And a lot of women don't understand what's going on, so they just abstain. Or maybe 10% of women have never had an orgasm in their lives, so they just don't understand why. That's why I did the Mystery is Over class. But we'll talk about that next week.
Now, is this also something that affects men as well?
Oh, yes, sir. I've been having quite a few men calling to ask about when the men's class will be starting. Now, right now, I am working with some gentlemen on their pelvic floor disorders. Men are suffering from urinary incontinence. They have they're not going to have the prolapse issue because they don't have a vagina. There's no place for the organs to fall. But the organs do kind of fall down inside of the pelvic floor, and it can cause dysfunction. And when we get that pelvic bowl of steel, that's when we integrate all the different pieces of the whole pelvic bowl. And what happens is we can get all those organs to stand back up again, just like they were when we were young. They can get resuspended. And when that happens, they function better. And a lot of the incontinence and pain issues that men are dealing with, including prostate inflammation, BPH, or benign prostate hypertrophy, a lot of men have this issue. And when you stand everything back up again and decrease inflammation in the body, and we have a whole piece of the program to help people knock out inflammation in this area, what happens is you get function back. So I am working with men, but I'm working with them individually. They are not, the Pelvic Health Transformation Program is for women only at this time.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
I was just kind of curious because you talked about the inflammation issue here, especially in men with their prostate. Is there a possible connection between that and perhaps prostate cancer?
Well, we know that the longer a man has inflammation of the prostate, the more likely he is to have prostate cancer. And yes, there is a connection. There's also a connection between inflammation and erectile dysfunction, ED. So if a man is having a hard time holding erection, then he might have inflammatory issues or some problem with the pelvic floor. So yeah, these individuals can really benefit, and it's very likely that this kind of work would decrease the chances of getting prostate cancer. I can't say that for certain, but I can tell you that if we're knocking out inflammation, the research tells us that we should be knocking down the chances of getting prostate cancer.
Yeah, I'd certainly think so.
Right. So, I can't tell you that there's any research that would absolutely back that, and I can't give you any statistics.
Now, this is, again, so interesting because it's not really something that I've heard of before. And for the listeners out there, in broadcasting more than 10 years, we talk a lot about, health and alternative health. And I've never heard of anything like this before. So how did you get inspired to start these programs in the first place?
Well, I am going to tell you that nothing like this program exists anywhere else. This is a very unique program. And it's not just being taught by myself. I have practitioners from around the world that have become involved with this. And how I got involved, thank you for asking, actually, because I had, late in life, a very large baby boy. And I had pelvic surgery before that, which weakened a lot of my pelvic space. My pelvic bowl was already weakened. I had some of the early warning signs, but nobody ever told me about them. And I don't know that anyone was aware that it should be told. so I was at risk, and then had a pregnancy, a live birth, big baby boy, and blew out my pelvic floor. And it took me 12 years of going to many practitioners and many doctors. And I mean, I had so many negative messages given to me that I would never get well. I had one practitioner say to me, "You have the pelvic floor of an 80-year-old. What do you want me to do with you?" It's like there's nothing that's going to happen here. Well, I can tell you that I have a pelvic bowl of steel now. I know how to do it, and I did it for myself, and I realized along the way that so many individuals are suffering with this and staying quiet. Who wants to talk about this?
Right.
Nobody wants to talk about this. Most women with pelvic floor issues are extremely reluctant to ever seek help unless they have an organ falling out of their body. They're embarrassed. They might have been told by family members or acquaintances or their health care providers that there's no useful remedies, just like I heard, nothing more can be done, or this is the way it is when you get older. So I can tell you that, there's so much of a, that there's a sociological tendency to stay away from these, and a lot of messaging that this is a normal consequence of aging, right?
Right.
So, I tell people, the whole subject of pelvic pain may be one that you're uncomfortable talking about. You may not want to talk to your partner about it, or to a friend, or even to your doctor. And it's important to raise these issues and to take care of it. And actually, our program is meant for that person that's having a tough time, because it takes place in the comfort of their own home. And they can be involved with the class or not. They can have a buddy or not. They can work with me individually. They'll have contact with many practitioners, and they'll get to speak to, that's the other piece. My recovery took many different approaches, because it wasn't just one thing that was going to fix it. And many of the practitioners that are out there have one thing that they're doing. This is what's going to work. It's a one-size-fits-all answer. And the truth is that as people come through our program, we have a lot of people come through with bladder issues, bladder prolapse, bladder incontinence, urinary urgency, and not any two of those individuals have come up with a solution set that is the same. Everybody ends up having an individualized program, because not everything, why did they get that way? You asked me that before. And maybe one person was very sports-minded when they were younger, and they had an injury that was the initial event. Mm-hmm. Maybe someone else had a sexual event that caused it. Maybe someone else had a bladder infection that was the initial event. I can't really explain why the answer is so different for so many people. That's why I made a program that would hit many different areas. And so what happens during the 6 months of the class, we meet 12 times, twice a month, and they get information. Each of the people in the class gets information. They get to try on different solutions. And one person may say, "Oh, Dr. Marsh was amazing. That did wonders for me." And someone else will say, "Well, that didn't do anything for me." But when we talked about this other piece and started doing this video, that's what did it for me. So the solution is different for different people, and what I've done is collected a lot of the solutions that are out there here in this country, Canada, Japan, in Europe, and South America, and China. And I've brought together many different approaches, and we hit from many different angles. And somebody's going to find their answer. So that's what the program's about.
I can't help myself, Sandy, but when I see pelvic bowl of steel, I just keep imagining people, or even one of them late-night infomercials. You can have a pelvic bowl of steel, Here's how. It's just so, in a way, it's funny in some ways, but I know it's a very serious issue that we're talking about here. But, to even think of creating something like this, boy, that's bold all by itself.
Well, I'll tell you what, the pelvic bowl of steel is all about, it happened with the first group of women that went through, because towards the very end of the class, the last 2 months, we integrate the strong pelvic floor that we've created and start lifting up the organs and integrating the pelvic floor with the rest of the body. And it feels like you get this very strong bowl in the base of the body. And I'm going to tell you something. It affects people in very deep ways. When you get good strength and health to this area, the women in the class are often reporting a greater sense of inner strength and confidence that positively affects their relationships and their view of themselves. And it reminds me, I've had women say, I feel like I finally found myself, or I'm so much more in love with life now. I'm seeing colors that are brighter. My husband and my children, I'm so much more in love. I've noticed this shift happening. And actually, in some of the men I'm working with as well, there's a shift that happens. And I can't ignore it. It brings me back to looking at how many of the ancient cultures have looked at this area of the body as our body's core, of the place where movement originates and has been recognized for centuries as a seat of our body's inner power or energy. The Chinese say that the pelvic floor is the home of qi, the qi energy that keeps us alive. It's our life energy. And I look at these ancient cultures, the Kundalini energy that the Hindus speak of coming through the chakras, and I have women talking to me about feeling different and feeling greater energy, greater well-being as a result of getting their pelvic floor together. So I'm kind of blown away at some of the results that not only I've had, but a lot of the women in the class have been saying, and some of the gentlemen I'm working with individually.
So it'd be fair to say that Hillary Clinton has a pelvic bowl of steel. I mean, anybody who's trying to tackle the kind of things that she does, you kind of wonder, boy, there's somebody with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, you're referring to brass ovaries?
Apparently so, yes.
Do you know what I saw years ago, this cartoon, and it was Hillary Clinton, and she was in a doctor's office, and the doctor was trying to explain to her that she couldn't have prostatitis because she doesn't have a prostate. And that's actually very, very funny because, in fact, the female prostate has been discovered. And actually, Dr. Ablin, the gentleman that discovered PSA antigen that men are often tested with, he used antibodies against that and found the female prostate. And the female prostate, women can get prostatitis. Women do have this ability to ejaculate. There's all this, like, a huge chunk of information that's coming about now that's affecting our understanding of pelvic floor health and sexual health. And there's stunning changes that are happening in this field. So anyway, it's funny that you would mention Hillary Clinton.
It just came to me. I don't know why.
Well, the pelvic bowl of steel. You know what? Think of the opposite, and this will help you. When we get older, and that pelvic bowl can get very, very soft and dysfunctional, and all of a sudden somebody is not controlling their bowels well, and they're getting surprises, or they're not controlling their urine very well and getting surprises, or for a woman having an organ fall into the vagina, it's very uncomfortable. Okay, and a doctor, according to the AMA, there is no medical condition until that organ falls out of the body, and then you do something about it. Okay, that's the truth. Okay.
Oh my.
And so there's, that's when it's called a prolapse. Before that, it's not a problem. And I can tell you that for the women, it is a problem.
Right.
And better to take care of it early rather than late. But even the women that have real serious late problems, they can pick it back up too. So the pelvic bowl in those conditions is not very strong. It's kind of mushy and weak and dysfunctional, and you can't shut off the flow of urine. You can't hold back the gas or the bowel movement, and it's really not fun. And it can I can tell you that there's men and women that are stuck at home right now, and they can't do anything about it. They are locked up at home, and they don't want to go and see friends and family because it's embarrassing, especially if there's fecal incontinence.
Mm-hmm.
And these people get their life back. They can't even go to the grocery store, right?
Wow.
So it's bad. And so, the urinary is bad enough, but fecal is awful because it smells, and people can tell what happened, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. And so what happens, a woman that has an organ in her vagina, she can't exercise anymore. She starts gaining weight. She's really embarrassed, and she definitely doesn't want to have sex. Okay, so it changes her life tremendously. That's the opposite of pelvic bowl of steel. Pelvic bowl of steel is all those organs are back up to where they belong. The pelvic floor is functioning well. Sexual appreciation is much greater. Sexual arousal is easier. You can close off all the stuff that wants to come out of us all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So we have control, and we can live our lives. In fact, I've had women tell me, like one lady writes to me, "I'm done. The cystocele is gone, and so is the incontinence. This program really worked for me. I'm free to be active both outdoors and in the bedroom without any fear or embarrassment. Thanks to all the teachers on the program, and especially to Dr. Sandy." Mm-hmm. So there's, she's getting her life back. Another lady says, now instead of going to the bathroom all the time, I go every 4 hours or more between urination. I'm free to live my life again without being tied to the bathroom. That's a big deal.
No, I can really imagine that. You just kind of take a look at, for instance, all the advertising that's out there, especially during prime time and later hours of television that talk about things such as, the incontinence that you've been describing here on the program, and that they sort of say, or it's addressed to something else. And then, of course, here's a drug that can help you with that.
Right.
But God forbid about the 30 side effects that comes along with this possible thing that you may have. But they may be kind of looking at this whole thing and not looking at it in the right way as what we're possibly talking about here today.
Yeah. And we know that at least 50 to 20 million people in the United States have bladder control problems. Mm-hmm. And it's twice as common in women than in men. And up to 60% of women report urinary incontinence, and this is young and old, but especially the mature audience is going to be more likely to have it. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people suffering. We know that about 50% of sufferers of incontinence and 78% of those with organ prolapse never seek treatment, ever. So that's crazy. And what are they going to get? If they go to seek treatment, they're going to get medications or surgery, usually. Mm-hmm. And those are not, they're not really curing the problem for the most part. The surgery might, there's a chance, but oftentimes it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Right?
Well, plus you're looking at a more expensive approach, if you will, or at least not cost-effective anyway. Mm-hmm. And then, as I just mentioned, when it comes to the possible use of drugs, well, those tend to have a lot of side effects at times.
And, there has been some research looking at how physical therapy can help, or taking care of this in a more of a personalized way, like what we're doing. And the reports have said 80 to 90% of the cases can be treated successfully without medication or surgery. We're seeing a 96% success rate in our program.
Wow.
And the 4% that haven't are people that don't do the program. They are people that are not involved. They don't come to class, they don't do their exercises. For whatever reason, they just don't participate. And we've had that happen. Sometimes life happens and they just, for whatever reason, they just don't do it. And but we had one of my, and once a person gets involved, they do the program, they can come back in very easily. They're part of they're part of our family now. So if something works and they just can't do it right then, they can come back in. And one of our ladies that was our a fail, came back after her life situation changed, and came back in, got involved, but she had done a little bit, and so she recovered in the last 3 months of our last program. So she actually did have enough of the information and had done a little bit, and it snapshotted her into a complete recovery. So that was kind of nice. So that that helped our numbers.
No.
But my biggest problem is when people are non-compliant. That's the only reason that they don't do well.
Well, if you have that fecal incontinence, I think you might want to think about some compliance.
Well, how about that? And actually all the rest of them too. There's so many people that are dealing with pain. I'm surprised at the number of men with pelvic pain issues going on. They're having pain, and they know it's somehow down there. They don't really know, and the doctor doesn't know what to do about it. They're saying, well, I kind of hurt down here somewhere sometimes, and the doctor says, well, what else is bothering you? So the
fact that I have to stand here and talk to you about this anomaly that I have no idea about, and you're supposed to be a professional leading me in a direction of recovery, that bothers me.
Yes, and these are the stories that I hear. These are gentlemen coming and saying these words to me, and so I have mentioned it, but I didn't understand it enough to know what to say either. Right? And a lot of people don't know their structure. They don't know where the parts are. So we, one of the things that we do in the class is we get to learn our parts.
There you go. Each place plays a part.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this question. If somebody was to go online, let's say they were to research something like this, how would they start?
Well, you can go to www.pelvicbowlofsteel, and that's where I have those 20 early warning signs of pelvic floor dysfunction. So you can, if you sign in, you'll receive that, and that's all that you'll receive. And then you get into the site, and you'll be able to learn more about the different classes that we have. We have the Pelvic Health Transformation Program. That's what we're talking about today. And we also have, one of the things that I've been interested in is helping out those women that are about to be pregnant or are already pregnant or have had pregnancy, and to understand what happens. What does your pelvic floor have to do to actually pass a baby? It's meant to do it. What can you do to prepare the pelvic floor? And so we have a class called How to Protect and Recover the Pelvic Floor in Pregnancy and Postpartum. And so that's one class. And the other class, of course, is The Mystery is Over, Understanding Female Sexual Health. And we have a lot of interest from both men and women. And I'm actually working on a set of videos that will be like a how-to. When we learn about where all the erectile tissues are, we'll talk about that in our next program. But there's erectile tissues, and women have a lot of different areas of erectile tissues, and most women don't know where they are. Most men don't know where they are. And most women hope that their most intimate partner would know where they are, but he doesn't know because she doesn't know.
Right.
So, and what we do is we go over in a very tasteful way where all the parts are and what you can do with them. And it's very, very helpful for couples. And and we also discuss how to speak to our partners, and how to maybe bring joy back into the relationship. So those are the courses, and so you can go to Pelvic Bowl of Steel, learn more about that, and be introduced to the different classes that we have. And there's a lot of information on Pelvic Bowl of Steel, and or the Pelvic Health Transformation Program. And, I guess what people need to know is that it is an at-home program. It's a 6-month virtual class. We meet 2 times a month. And you can come to class, or you can just listen to the classes afterwards. They're available for the entire length of the class and for a little bit of time afterwards. And so there's fun videos to watch, there's exercises to do, and you get a lot of equipment at the beginning of the class. You get a box. It's your pelvic pelvic care kit, and there'll be videos and books and equipment, things that will help you. So you'll pop in your first video or you download your video, and it'll say, you need this, this, and this to do this class, and you'll already have it in your box, except for common household items like a towel or a chair.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the people like to have a buddy, so we set up people with buddies, and they can help hold you accountable and provide mutual support to each other. And then we have a private Facebook page where women can meet, and nobody else can see those communications, and they can speak openly about what's happening with them and ask each other questions and give each other support that way. And then we have those optional classes, and the classes that I mentioned are a part of the Pelvic Health Transformation Program. So the women that come to the class can go into the sexual function or the pregnancy class or not, whatever they choose to do. And so they can, learn a little bit more. I encourage all the women to go into the female sexual function class because most women, I would venture to say, we have physicians coming through the class just to learn the anatomy, because even we have a 2013 anatomy book that is missing essential erectile tissues of the female genitalia.
Wow.
And so what happened was these structures were very, very well described about 100 years ago, and before that. But about 100 years ago, they were removed and are no longer described. And they're being rediscovered. So it's time to talk about it.
I would think so.
Right? So in any case, that is going on, and I'd like for women to at least know what parts they have, where they are. And interestingly, the erectile tissues in both men and women don't lose their function, like the actual erectile tissues maintain excellent function throughout life. If your heart's still beating, the erectile tissues will still work.
Wow.
And it's interesting because we can lose function in other types of tissues, but these tissues are so different that they maintain function. And we have women in their 70s, 80s having sexual experiences that they've never had in their lives. And so it's interesting.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. When you think about, for instance, menopause and even andropause, being such a big deal, and people associating the fact, well, you're getting older, things are breaking down, that's just the way it is. But more often, especially through this program, we have discovered that all of that is just a lot of nonsense. It's just really seemingly a way of saying, we're ignorant, and this is the best way to excuse ourselves for having ignorance in the first place. Would that be a good way to look at it?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. That's exactly what's going on. And what I can tell you from my experience is that women and men are developing more ability, more, their deeper experiences and more profound experiences sexually, and I'm going to say physically, mentally, and spiritually. There's been, I would say that the best sex that can happen is going to happen later in life, after menopause, after andropause, than before. And that's a bold statement, but that's what I'm seeing to be so. And unfortunately, there are many people that get to their 40s or 50s and decide that's it, they're done, and it needs to be attended to.
I agree with you. We need more sex going on out there. That way, people are happier when they go to work.
Well, they're happier. There's less stress. There's more connection, and there's greater devotion within the relationship. So there's a deeper satisfaction with life. Why are we here? Right? And I think it's really quite profound. So anyway, I have to tell you, it's a really surprising piece of this program that I didn't expect. I was out to help women get their pelvic floors back together, I had no idea that so many women would wake up sexually.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I had to make the other class, because they needed it,
mm-hmm.
right? So that's, that's what it's all about. And so the pelvic bowl of steel, yes, it was kind of it was something that happened. We were all laughing about it, but pelvic bowl of steel kind of stuck, mm-hmm. because it really it shows the strength and confidence that comes with having great health and vitality in the core of our body.
Outstanding. It's so interesting to do this because you just keep discovering these new things out there, and then finally, 4 or 5 years later, it seems like mainstream media picks up on it as though it's the newest, hottest thing. It's like, well, we were talking about that thing 5, 6 years ago. What are you guys doing out here? What's going on? So it's very exciting to know about this, and I'm wondering if you could, for our listeners, with the short amount of time that we have left, what are the websites where people can find out more about this?
Well, the website, as I mentioned to you, is Pelvic Bowl of Steel. Everything is available through that website. And I can give people access to my office, if you like.
Sure.
That would be, you can just actually call in 520-743-0575. You can learn a little bit about the programs. If you, and also, I should mention this. We've had individuals that have been through our program that have been very kind and donated money for scholarships for individuals that want help with paying for the program. But this is an application that's needed. So you can get to that at Pelvic Bowl of Steel. I think it's a /APP2 and then a /. You can get straight to that application page, or just go into Pelvic Bowl of Steel and look for getting an application for a scholarship. But we do have scholarship monies that have come in to help individuals. It's really nice that people go through the program and they get their lives back, and then what they do is they donate back in. Mm-hmm. And some of those individuals actually received some of our early scholarships, and then they chose to give back to the program when they were able to.
Outstanding.
So, yeah, it's really nice. Mm-hmm. I know, it's a wonderful thing. It gives me warm fuzzies. So anyway, that's going on, and so Pelvic Bowl of Steel, PelvicBowlofSteel.com, and so you can go to so it's Pelvic Bowl I didn't put in the bowl, BOWL, right. PelvicBowlofSteel.com, and or you can contact the office directly, and we will love to hear from you. And if you have questions, that's fine. In fact, we have a limited amount of time, but if someone just has a quick question, or they want to find out if they're appropriate for the program, you can do that through the Pelvic Bowl of Steel website and email us, or you can call into the office, and someone here will set aside a free 10-minute consult for you, and I can speak with you directly and see if you're a good candidate for the program.
Well, very good. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for joining us around the program today. This has been very enlightening, to say the least.
Yeah, it's been fun speaking with you.
Take care. Again, the website is pelvicbowlofsteel.com, correct?
That's it.
All right. Well, again, thank you for joining us around the program today.
You're very welcome. Take care.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there. Be sure to keep continuing to follow us as we keep bringing these great things for you to discover out there, where you can kind of maybe get away from surgery and taking prescription drugs. You can find out more also by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We also have our exclusive e-news updates we encourage you to sign up for as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you again for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.